note by note, phrase by phrase. And the music's a hierarchy, right? Because there's each individual note, but then there's the relationship of the notes to each other at every level of analysis, all the way up to the totality of the piece, right? The totality of a symphony informs every note. The totality of a symphony informs every phrase. Every phrase informs every note. So you can move up and down the levels of analysis in music, and if you love to listen to music, you do that while you listen, especially if the music is well arranged, because you can listen to one instrument carrying the melody line, then you can switch to the drums, and you can listen to the vocals. You can move back and forth, up and down in the hierarchical structure of the music. That's what consciousness does. Now you sit down and you try to work out a piece on the piano. What are you doing exactly? You're automatizing musculature. It's hard. You're programming your body, right? You're doing that with conscious awareness. You painstakingly move through the notes. This is especially true if you're a neophyte. Some people are so brilliant at playing the piano they can sight read instantly and do a perfect job of it, but we're not going to talk about those people at the moment. Mere mortals, note by note, right? And you listen, and you get faster at it and faster at it. It gets more unconscious in some sense because you can do that automatically. But then you move up a level of analysis and you see if the automatic note by note mastery that you've attained is now appropriate at the level of phrase. And then if you get really good at it, if you get genius level at it, you can take those phrases that you've automatized and you can see them in relationship to the entirety of the symphony, and you can twist and bend them just a tiny bit to put little mistakes on the edges of notes. So you really see that with acoustic instruments. And then you go even beyond perfection as a musician to the use of imperfection creatively. And when that happens, it's sacred. And that's why we love it, because the sacred nourishes us. And this is the truth. It's a definition. And just because we don't know what the sacred is doesn't mean that isn't true. And that's the humanities, right? That's the attempt to discover what's sacred and to understand it. When you're playing a piece, you make a mistake. Then you go back and you concentrate on the phrase that you played in error. You may have automatized that mistake, which means your faulty knowledge now interferes with your ability to learn how to play it properly. And so not only do you have to focus on the mistake with your conscious awareness, you have to undo the certainty that gave rise to that error. You have to unpack the automatization. You have to re-automatize it. Then you have to integrate it back into the piece. Okay? That's exactly what you do in life. That's exactly what you do with speech. Free speech. That's no right. Or maybe it is, but we could talk about what a right is. Well, you could say, well, there's rights. There's a list of them. There's something granted to you by the government. They're granted to you by the social contract. That's one way of looking at it. It's true in some sense, because the domain of rights is governed in some sense by consensus. There's a social contract element to it, but that doesn't mean that's all there is to it. It certainly doesn't mean that rights are only what the government allows you or that society allows you. It certainly does not mean that. And it does not mean that for a reason. It's a reason that's outside of propositional argument. And we have an intuition of that, well delineated in the West with the notion of natural right, which is a metaphysical notion. Right? And it isn't pointing to a reality that we can understand in an obvious manner. It's certainly not pointing to a reality we can understand in the same remarkably propositionalized manner that we've been able to understand an assortment of scientific truths. But that doesn't mean that it isn't pointing to something real. It just means, it may mean that it's pointing to something that's real but so complicated we haven't been able to work it out yet.